They're two happy women bringing you inspiring stories, politics, pop culture, and lifestyle hacks, all with an eye to making our communities and our country a better place to live. It's the Happy Women Podcast with your hosts, Jen Horn and Katie Gorka.
Thanks for joining us and welcome to another episode of the Happy Women Podcast. I'm Jennifer Horn.
And I'm Katie Gorka.
And we have a lot to talk about today because we are getting down to the wire. I think as we record this today, is it 42 days until Election Day? It's getting close. And it does stun me, however, and we'll talk about the state of the race in a second. It's been very back and forth with Kamala as new coordinated candidate. But Katie, you are the chairwoman of the Fairfax County GOP in the state of Virginia. And I cannot believe it, but Virginia, amongst a few other states, have already started early voting. So you've been welcoming people out to the polls. Tell us about that. It seems so early, but I guess if you're going to have the Democrats make the rules, we got to play by them.
Exactly. So actually a week ago, Monday, Pennsylvania opened their polls. Then Virginia and two other states opened up on Friday. Why we still have 45 days of early voting, which was something that was established to accommodate COVID. We have no COVID. So why do we still have 45 days of early voting? It's insane, but we do. And we are going to play by those rules so that we can win and change those rules. But Friday morning, 8 a.m., our polls opened, and not across the board, but just, here in Fairfax County, 3 central locations. I was at the Fairfax Government Center. And I got to tell you, it was a party. It was crazy fun. I could not believe the level of energy and excitement. We had tons of people with Trump flags. We had a long line of voters out the door, which persisted through most of the day. I heard the same stories from the other 2 early voting locations. There was so much energy and excitement on the Trump side, which you can see. I posted a video of this on Twitter. And then you look over at the Democrat tent and there were, I think, 3 volunteers, not a soul around them. And I just think it's very telling. Yeah, exactly. I just think it's very telling that there is all this excitement and energy around the Trump campaign. And I think for Kamala, people will, come out and vote because they have to, but there is not nearly the level of excitement. And I think ultimately it's going to translate into votes. So I'm super proud of us in Fairfax County because we were able to see a 278% uptick in early voting compared to 4 years ago. That's a super good sign. And that says to me, the Republicans are playing by these stupid rules, which I don't want to reinforce the rules, but it says to me that we have a much better chance of winning.
It's interesting because President Trump's been talking about the stupid early voting rules. And I think we all agree. We talked about this a little bit earlier when we were off the air just chatting with each other. These rules, these early voting rules, ballot harvesting, all these different tactics that Democrats have put into place across the country. It feels gross, and they are silly, just like President Trump says, but yet we have to abide by them. We have to do them. And the success, I think, isn't just in Virginia. There's some new information that was released today by Fox News that says in Florida and in Pennsylvania and in North Carolina, the Democrats' advantage in early voting that they had in 2020, the people requesting ballots, has all but gone away. And Republicans have taken the advantage from Democrats in those states. And look, I think we all anticipate Trump wins Florida, but Pennsylvania and North Carolina are really important, particularly Pennsylvania, which, as we've established, opens up about 3 or 4 different paths to victory for President Trump. Pennsylvania is a very, very key state. And so it's good to hear that advantage is going. I feel like that momentum is real. And yes, there are a slew of people, especially in my state of California and New York, some of the big cities, that are going to go out there and vote for Kamala because they hate Trump. But you have to ask yourself, who's going to create the momentum on the issues? And the people who are really suffering right now economically, or who feel like they are not as safe as they were when President Trump was in office, those people are going to build real momentum amongst the people that are going to determine this election. And I'm just hopeful, and I pray for it actually every day, that this is going to turn out in the right way so that we don't have to. I mean, I can't imagine 4 years of Kamala Harris, and I hope we don't ever have to think we will
I don't know. Have you seen these great new videos? I think they're going up on Twitter. These great new videos that Trump is doing where he's going into little markets, grocery stores, and talking to people about how they're struggling. That's a very real and important message. And I think it's great that he's putting it out there.
It also goes around the news media, right? You don't have to rely on the news media picking these up. He can use those little videos, these vignettes on social media. He gave a lady $100 at a grocery store in Pennsylvania and said, this won't pay for everything, but it'll help you offset your costs. And I guess that woman's grocery bill was $196. So it does come in handy. And, you know, if there is something, we always talk about how people can get involved. Have you been following the story out of Nebraska?
No. What is the story?
So there are 2 states in the country who are not winner-take-all states with presidential electoral votes. Nebraska is one of them. So they assign their electoral votes based on the amount of votes that come into the state. So it's believed that by most people that Kamala Harris will get 1 electoral vote from Nebraska. And experts like Charlie Kirk and others have said that it's very possible that this could be a 269 to 269 tie on election night. And that 1 vote from Nebraska could make a difference for Kamala Harris. Now, here's the rub with Nebraska. You live in a state like Virginia. I live in California, where this stuff would fly for about 2 seconds. And that is that Nebraska has a Republican governor and Nebraska has a Republican-led legislature. And the legislature right now has the opportunity to vote to change their state from allocated electoral votes to a winner-take-all scenario. And there's been a lot of pressure on the legislature. And so I bring it up because if you do want to do something, you can make phone calls to Nebraska's legislature and encourage them to make this change, because the governor says he will sign it. President Trump has been there the last few days trying to get them to sign this law. And look, I know things don't feel all the best when you change the rules like that, but let me ask you, if you're in California, do you think that a Democrat would wait for 4 seconds to change the rules if it benefited them? Like, this is why you have people putting you into power. So, you know, maybe it's not going to come down to 1 electoral vote, but if it does, do we want to be sitting here looking in the rearview mirror going, wow, we could have prevented this? Yeah, it's something kind of interesting. If you do want to call Nebraska, you can do that.
Absolutely. I wanted to say one last thing about Virginia, too, as a sort of harbinger of what we might see going forward. So at this time, 4 years ago, Joe Biden was leading Trump by over 11 points. Yeah. And Biden ended up winning Virginia by 10 points. Right now, they're saying that Kamala has but a 2-point lead over President Trump. And, you know, I think one of the things that polling doesn't sufficiently take account of is enthusiasm level. Yeah. You know, it's one thing to ask a person, who are you going to vote for? But it's another to try to gauge, are they motivated enough to get out and vote? And this is where I'm telling you, I think the excitement for Trump is going to far outweigh the sort of lukewarm attitude toward Kamala. And the last thing I want to tell you is, it was really fun. So we had such a good day on Friday and Saturday, huge numbers of early voters, so much excitement for Trump. And the word really got out there because a bunch of us posted videos about it, and they got a lot of traction on social media. So we got a phone call from President Trump on Sunday afternoon. Yeah. So at about 3 p.m, they sent out an email. They said, Trump's going to be on the phone for Virginia voters, along with with Governor Youngkin. So thousands of people called in and got this great pep talk from the president. I just thought that was really fun. Volatility and uncertainty are everywhere we turn. Many Americans have grown increasingly tired of the reckless fiscal spending, mounting national debt, and the looming threat to the dollar. With never-ending political and global conflicts, Americans are looking for a way out of the fragile paper system and craving a trustworthy asset to help protect their savings. That's why they turn to gold, specifically a gold IRA from Augusta Precious Metals. If you have over $100,000 in a retirement account, it's time you learned about the potential benefits of a gold IRA from Augusta Precious Metals. Augusta Precious Metals is a world-class organization that prides itself on top-notch service. Ready to learn more? Get your free guide on gold IRAs today by calling 855-222-6994. Volatility is everywhere. Now is the time to take control of your retirement to secure a brighter financial future with Augusta Precious Metals. Call them at 855-222-6994 today.
Can you imagine if Virginia actually is in play for President Trump? I mean, that's insane. And there's been a lot of work and flipping around in the state of Virginia by Glenn Youngkin and others. So that's really good news. And just on the polling, there's a lot of polling all over the place right now. You do have to keep in mind they oversample Democrats. And to put it in perspective, I just read a story. Do you know in Wisconsin in 2020, they had Biden winning by 17 points? Do you know what the outcome was? He won by 0.06%, less than a percentage point. So Wisconsin's already a weird state when it comes to polling. But my point is this: don't let polls either encourage you or depress you. Polls are polls. And yes, you want to be on the right side of the poll, but we still have to get out there and do our work. That's really kind of the bottom line. And you listen to President Trump, he's been talking all over the place. He's been campaigning extensively in Georgia and in Pennsylvania and in North Carolina this week. And one of the things that I've been listening to as someone who knows Kamala Harris, because I've watched her in California from the time she was DA in San Francisco to Attorney General in our state, and of course, Senator, and then she went on to become Vice President. President Trump's been referencing Kamala Harris's policies in California quite a bit. And when she comes out and she tries to present her new take on all of these issues, all you have to do is look at her record, because Kamala Harris has a record, and it shows you she's a transactional actor. Sometimes she does things, number one, to benefit herself, and then number two, to serve her far left ideology. And there's a great story that it's not a great story. It's a bad story, but it's a great example of the policies of Kamala Harris kind of coming to California to wreak havoc on us. And when she was Attorney General, there were two propositions that Californians will always tell you ruined the state when it comes to crime and safety. The first was Proposition 47, which reclassified all kinds of crimes. It reclassified felonies as misdemeanors. So that's why you have, and you hear President Trump talking about this, thieves walking into Walmart with calculators because they can steal up to $900 worth of goods, and it's a misdemeanor. It's not a felony. And they can do this over and over and over again, and there's no real punishment. So that's a Kamala Harris policy under Prop 47. Prop 57 was set out to decrease the prison population, which Democrats thought was a really bad thing to have all of these people in prison. And so they said, unless you are a violent offender, you're going to be eligible for early release, essentially. The problem was when Kamala Harris was writing this proposition and when she was designing it, she only included as violent crimes, 23 different things. Now that may seem like a lot, but if you're a criminal, you can come up with a lot of stuff that is not included on this violent crime list. And California is getting all of these people let out of prison who are classified as nonviolent under the law, but are actually pretty violent. So in Kamala Harris's California, it's not violent to blow up a school or an auditorium with explosives.
What?
Yes. In Kamala Harris's California, a drive-by shooting is not considered violent.
Oh my gosh.
Kamala Harris's California, a rape of a woman or of a child is not considered a violent crime because these are not contained in the 23 items that are considered violent. So you have all of these really bad people who are eligible to get out of prison way before their sentence is up. And so now cue the story of this guy, Andrew Lester. Andrew Lester, by all accounts, at least economically, had everything in the world going for him. He was the great grandson of Max Factor. So he was the beneficiary of the money that was created by this cosmetics giant. And he's 60 years old today. He's currently in prison, but he's going to be getting out. He was charged and convicted of 86 sexual assaults and rapes on women and children in California. When he was charged, he managed to escape and took off and went to Mexico to try to get out of the way. Dog the bounty hunter, if you can believe it, the story is wild, tracks him down, brings him back to the United States. He's convicted and his sentence is 124 years in prison, which seems reasonable for all of that, maybe even low. Well, he appeals, and in 2013, I think it was, they revised his sentence to 50 years in prison. Well, now, not even 20 years in, he has applied for release because under Kamala Harris's Prop 57, he is not considered a violent criminal. And he is going to be let out of the prison system without even serving 20 years. And it is so heart-wrenching because his victims are still alive. The people that he went after, the people who watched him in our state, still alive. They still remember this story. And you know as well as I do, when you study criminals, Katie, the people that really have the hardest time being rehabilitated are sexual predators. You can rehabilitate a murderer easier than you can someone who preys on women and children. And there is no explanation. This is just the law. Even George Gascon has commented on this and said that it seems out of line. Rob Bonta, the Attorney General, says it seems out of line. But because we have this law in the books, Prop 57, thanks to Kamala Harris, he gets to walk, and there's nothing anybody can do about it.
Wow, that's an incredible story.
Is that insane? I mean, think about all of the things. I mean, you'd be surprised. I can go through the list of crimes that are considered nonviolent in California because Kamala Harris had the victims at heart. The criminals at heart instead of the victims.
I just wonder, do you think a case like this is going to be enough to make the California legislature reconsider?
You know, it's interesting because there's a state senator named Shannon Grove, who's up in the central Northern California area. And she is a huge advocate for child crimes. And one of the things that was considered nonviolent was child trafficking and sex trafficking, essentially. And she worked her tail off this legislative session to try to add those crimes to the list of 23 violent felonies. And the Democrats turned her down time and time again. And it wasn't until the media heard about this. And remember, our media here is far left, just like everywhere else. But it even became too much for the media to ignore. And she started getting some traction and said that child trafficking should not be just considered to be a nonviolent offense. And so finally, they made a call to Gavin Newsom's office. A lot of people started making phone calls to his office. He made a call to the Democrats in the legislature, and eventually they added child trafficking to that list of violent crimes. They did that at the end of this legislative session. If not for her work, and I think she's been doing this the last few sessions in a row, trying to just build up some steam and momentum, the only way you make changes in the state is if you can finally convince the media to sit on your side and people will actually hear the story and then they'll start making phone calls. That's the thing about California. There are people who are concerned about crime here, but so oftentimes they don't even hear the stories and they don't know the why as to why there's so much crime. They haven't gone that far. It takes stuff like this to try to bring people back into sanity so that we can actually start working for change.
And are the women who were his victims, do you see them speaking out yet? Haven't
seen anything yet, but I would imagine as we get closer to his release that you would hope.
What a nightmare for them.
Speak out. I can't imagine. Ugh. It's pretty incredible. So when you heard President Trump and he was talking a lot about Kamala Harris and about her policies in California, that's just one that you can take around. And this is from a party that says they're all about protecting women and children.
Yeah.
And this is why I think just to go back to the state of the race for a moment, if you look at the polls on every issue but abortion, President Trump has the confidence of the country over Kamala Harris because she's had the opportunity to do something the last 3.5 years while she was in California, and she did nothing except make our problems worse.
Yep. So I have to tell you, yesterday I sat on a panel, me and another Republican sat with two Democrats, and it was just really eye-opening. I mean, it was very civil. This was to an audience, a small audience. And so it was very civil, but it was very eye-opening for me to hear how the Democrats presented their perspective. And one of the ones that I think is sort of most sticking in my craw today was the female politician. The question was, what are the issues that you are seeing, most be foremost for your constituents, right? And here in Fairfax County, where we have a very, very large legal immigrant population, I said, illegal immigration is very, very big here for all kinds of reasons. Safety, economy. It's just what I hear people talking about all the time. But this woman said, I think she talked about something like access to healthcare, right? People don't want to have to be bankrupted getting healthcare. And then she said this: But you know what I hear people talking about a lot is with the Kamala campaign is just the joy. You know, the joy. I'm not kidding you. The joy that they feel, and people are tired of the division and the conflict. And
let me guess, they want to turn the page.
They want to turn the page. They don't want to go back. This is what she said. I'm telling you. And I just want to say, I mean, it's been very, very interesting here in our first couple of days of early voting, because we have had numerous instances of Democrats coming over and harassing our Republican greeters and volunteers.
Joyfully, I'm sure.
Oh, yes. Ever so joyfully. So
well, I thought it was interesting. I don't know if you saw just on those two issues, and I've got a great story for you, but on those two issues, Tim Walz, I actually can't believe it. I wrote it down. Yesterday, I agreed with him for the first time on something. And that is, I don't know if you caught it in one of his rallies. He said, we can't take 4 more years of this.
I know.
And I thought these guys are doing such a great job of branding, turning the page and running on joy that they have forgotten that they are the ones that are actually in office still today, right? The 4 years. I agree. We can't handle 4 more years of this. And I don't know if you had the chance to see it. And we'll play the video here. Actually, I'll make sure that Misty has it so that you'll all get to see this. But on immigration, I would have never believed it. I mean, I really still believe that the economy, obviously people's pocketbook, is probably the number one issue. But I think number 2, closely behind it, is immigration. And I think you're right about that. I think people are upset. I talked to Kate Monroe this week on my morning show in Los Angeles, and we had her on this podcast as well. She does VetCom and tries to help get housing for homeless veterans. And she was talking about how she had gone in San Diego to this place that they call the Island, which is in the middle of, like, I don't know if it's like a storm drain or what it is, but all these homeless people have set up shop. And there are a multitude of veterans, women and men, who are homeless, who are on this island living in squalor. And when she talked to them, they said that they had only been homeless because of, falling on hard times. They had only been homeless for about a year. They had found their way to a shelter, so they had shelter. But because so many people have been coming across the border in San Diego, the local government agencies have been kicking homeless veterans out of the shelters here so that they can make room for the people that are here illegally. And so now these people are being forced into living on this weird island that's just covered in filth. And the video that I want to share with you, and we'll do it here.
It is impossible to release gang members and criminals into our country through the borders and broken walls, and then infiltrate them in our community that's already impoverished, that's already broken, that's already disinvested. And when the black gangs, the leadership in the black gangs in Chicago get fed up with the illegalities and the criminal activity of these migrants or non-citizens, the city of Chicago is going to go up in smoke, it's going to go up in flame, and there's going to be nothing that the National Guard or our government can do about it when the bloodshed hit the streets, blacks against migrants.
And I'm not glorifying American gang members, but I do think it's an interesting perspective. There was a video made on the streets of Chicago. Chicago has been one of these hotspots with these Venezuelan gangs. So you had Aurora, Colorado with the apartment buildings. South side of Chicago is also seeing a huge onslaught of all of these Venezuelan migrants coming in and trying to take over. You have current gang members. You have people that are called retired gang members. I don't know if they get like a card or something when they retire from the gangs. And you have a minister who's out there wearing his former Cons for Trump shirt, saying that enough is enough, that these people have taken over the streets of Chicago. They're displacing, they're taking away resources for the people in their communities. Now, say what you will about whether these guys are gang members, but you know something. When gang members are shouting about the problems from other Venezuelan gang members, we have a real issue here. And this isn't just a border town issue. This has gotten so bad under Biden and under Harris that it is an every city issue. Imagine they're talking about it all the way up north in Chicago, from problems that you used to think were strictly belonging to California and Arizona and New Mexico and Texas. It is everywhere. And I really do believe that when this is all said and done and people are asked what they voted on and why, you're going to see immigration probably up there at a very high number 2 on the list.
I 100% agree.
All right. You want a fun story now?
Yes.
Okay. So have you ever done 23andMe?
I have not done that one, but I have done one. Yes.
Or like Ancestry is another
Yes.
one.
Yeah.
So you can do, if you haven't, I've done 23andMe. I've not done Ancestry. I've probably handed my DNA over to the Chinese government. So that's exciting, but we'll see. I'll probably have a clone wandering around at some point. But I think it's really interesting. It tells you about your ethnic background. 23andMe also tells you things that you're predisposed to when it comes to diseases or your health. And then it also has, you can choose to opt in, kind of a database where you can connect with other family members. So you can track, former, like second cousins, third cousins, fourth cousins. In today's America, family secrets have been blown up. Like, I've had so many people in my life that have found siblings they didn't know they had.
Wow, really?
My cousin, I will tell, I don't think it's a secret. My cousin did not know who her father was, and she found him using 23andMe. And unfortunately, he had passed. But what she had is she went from being an only child to realizing she had like 6 brothers and sisters all around the country.
Gosh.
And she's met them all and actually created pretty good relationships with all of them. So it changes lives. I had another friend who found out that she had a sibling she didn't know she had. And, I mean, there's so many different stories. So those family secrets are no longer safe.
Right.
But I thought this story was so compelling, and I found it because it was based in California. So this was up in Oakland, and it was back in 1951. A 6-year-old boy, his name was Luis Albino. He was 6 years old. He was in a park, and he was playing by himself when he was abducted. Now, after 70 years, 7 decades, he was found because of an online ancestry test. Apparently, his niece in Oakland, with assistance from the police, the FBI, and the Justice Department, they were able to locate her uncle living on the East Coast. He's a father, a grandfather. He's a retired firefighter. He went to the Marine Corps. He's a Marine Corps veteran. He served in Vietnam. And his niece is 63 now. She found Albino, reunited him with this California family back in June. Apparently, his story is that back in 1951, on February 21st, a woman lured him where he had been playing in a park with his older brother and promised him in Spanish, he was Puerto Rican born, that she would buy him candy. You think those things don't work, but apparently they do. The woman kidnapped the child, flew him to the East Coast, where he ended up with a couple who raised him as if they were his own son. Officials said family members didn't exactly specify where he lives, but for 70 years he was missing. And his family never forgot him. They were always talking about him. They had his photo hung up at relatives' houses. His mother died in 2005, but never gave up hope that her son was alive. And so Oakland police acknowledged that the niece played an integral role in finding her uncle. And apparently, she said when she met him, he hugged her, said, "Thank you for finding me," gave her a kiss on the cheek, and was able to reunite the entire family. And she said all it took was her to take this DNA test online, and it showed a match with the man who eventually turned out to be this guy and her uncle. And they were able to use that to connect, which I just thought was so incredible. This is where technology, I mean, you see the dark side, you see the bad side of it. But at the same time, sometimes you find someone that you didn't know was out there. And I just thought it was a really cool thing. And apparently they've reunited, and the whole family seems to be embracing one another, which is great.
That is a wild story. I just feel so bad for the mom, though.
I know.
To live her whole life. Yeah. So I have to tell you a funny story,
Okay.
Which is we went to a church a couple of weeks ago because there was a black pastor there who I'd met, who I really, really liked.
Your friend from North Carolina?
What?
Was that your friend from North Carolina?
No,
Okay,
he's in Virginia.
Virginia, excuse me.
Yeah, he's in Virginia, and but I'd met him a couple times because he's sort of active in the community, and so we went to his church, and it was great church service. And then we got to talking afterwards. Okay, so he looks black. His dad was Jamaican. His mom was Polish. Growing up in Chicago, his mom's maiden name is Gorka.
So your family is what you're saying.
So we actually think that Sebastian and this pastor are related, because Gorka is it's not a common family name at all. So I think they're going to do genetic testing to see if they're related. Isn't that wild?
They should, because I mean, truly, Poland and Hungary, I mean, everything, the back and forth, I think I may have told you this, but my family, I always grew up thinking that I was 100%. Well, my dad was 100% Czech. And of course, nobody's 100% anything anymore.
Right.
But we learned that actually my grandfather's family was from right off the border, over the border in Austria. So everything was so intermingled, I think, in that area. There was so much back and forth. That is really
well, and we know Sebastian's family actually came from Poland, because Gorka is not it's not an ethnic Hungarian name. It's a Polish name.
Got it.
That they for some reason went to Hungary around 1848, which was the time of a revolution, and maybe had to flee Poland because they'd been involved in the revolution. Who knows? But the family's from Poland. So really curious to see.
If he's Polish, then this is obviously a cousin.
I know.
That is the coolest
isn't that crazy? Yeah, I think it's really fun.
All right. So you need to do Ancestry.com or 23andMe, and you have to let us know how it goes. I think those things are really, I think it's kind of fun and interesting. I know the bad side. Like, I hate the idea that your information gets out there, but it is really interesting.
Or like there was a terrible, did you ever follow that terrible story about a fertility doctor, I want to say in the Philadelphia area, who ended up, being the father.
Like 100 kids, right?
Yeah, a ton of kids. And that only came out in the course of, and I guess I'm trying to remember why I know all this. I think there was a
Netflix documentary on it.
Well, there was a woman who wrote a book about it. And I think it was her mother and father, perhaps, who were, wrapped up in all this. And I don't think the mother had ever even told the father. Like, the father didn't know.
That it wasn't hit. Oh, God.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah.
Again, there's a good side and a bad side. Family secrets, no more. Sorry. What you thought you were going to get away with, not anymore.
There you
Unbelievable.
go.
By the way, speaking of Netflix documentaries, I started watching the Menendez brothers. Monsters. It's not a documentary, but it is Ryan Murphy's take on monsters, or on Eric and Lyle Menendez and their story.
Okay.
I'll get back to you. I'm only a couple episodes in. It's pretty wild. Ryan Murphy's wild. He did the Jeffrey Dahmer one, but I'll let you know. I'll get your review next week when I finish it.
Okay. The other movie we're going to have to talk about, if you can get to see it, is Am I a Racist?
I'll try to do that this weekend. Did you actually end up seeing it? I know Seb saw it.
He saw it. I haven't seen it yet, but I know it's in theaters around me, so I want to go see it.
Why can't we live closer? We could go on a movie date.
I know. Imagine.
All right. Well, we'll have to go on a movie date separately. It'll be like the latest in high-tech dating.
There you go.
Thank you all for joining us. Make sure you get Katie's book. It's called Next Gen Marxism, available wherever you get your books. You can check her out online as well. Her website is katiegorka.org. You can search her out on Facebook at Catherine Gorka, and you can look for her on Twitter at Gorka Katie. You can find me at Jennifer Horn Radio on Instagram and Facebook, and at Jennifer Horn on X and on Truth. And we really appreciate those 5-star reviews. We really appreciate you sharing this podcast with your friends. It means a lot. We enjoy doing it. We hope you enjoy being here with us. So share it. Leave us some reviews, help us with the algorithm a bit, and connect with us on all of our platforms, SalemPodcastNetwork.com. For all of that, just look for Happy Women there on the homepage. And thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Happy Women Podcast.